welcome to the inside of the BMW M2 CS, the third and last instalment of this current BMW M2 story. Now, you remember the original BMW M2? I liked it a great deal, actually. It was a bit of a hot rod, really. It was a small rear-wheel drive coupe with a 3-litre straight-six engine with a single twin scroll, so one turbo with two scrolls. And it was really good fun. And you started to think then, oh, maybe this is the car, now that Porsche has started to fit a 4-cylinder engine to the Cayman, maybe this is the car that could suddenly be better than a Cayman. And I don't think it was quite, but it was a laugh. And then came the M2 competition, which was keener and sharper, and it had a rear subframe that was rigidly attached to the chassis, and out went the single turbocharged engine, and in came a detuned version of the BMW M3/M4 S55, not N55 engine, and that has two turbos rather than one, and with its extra sharpness and extra keenness, well then, that was a car, some said, depending on my mood, me too, that is a car that was better than the equivalent 4-cylinder Porsche Cayman at the time. And now there is this. This is the last of the M2s before the model is replaced next year. It stays in production until September of 2020, so it gets 444 brake horsepower, 450 round horsepower, made 1,000 RPM further up the rev range than the M2 competition, makes the same 405 pounds-foot as in the M2 competition, and that's developed from like 2,500 through to 5,000 revs, so it's just a big flat torque plateau while the power curve goes up pretty much a straight line, which is all quite encouraging. That power goes to the rear wheels via a retuned M active limited slip differential, and either a manual, I wouldn't mind in a manual actually, this has got the 7-speed twin clutch gearbox. I kind of think with this kind of thing that embraces interaction, a manual might be nicer, but we've got the twin clutch, so let's go with it. But those things are just an aside to the other changes that BMW has made. So there is a carbon fibre roof up here, which comes from the GT4 race car, as does the carbon fibre reinforced plastic bonnet. There is lightweight carbon fibre around the front end, there is a bigger spoiler at the back, there's a splitter at the front, and there's a new diffuser at the back, and that pretty much takes out all of the aerodynamic lift. I don't think this car really makes downforce, but it basically makes neutral lift. Now, those things, the carbon fibre, would make the car lighter, but what with an engine that needs a little bit more cooling, and also for the first time on an M2, adaptive dampers. The weight actually remains the same at about 1,570 kilos, but it is worth knowing that the new roof structure does promote torsional rigidity in the shell, and also because the roof is carbon and the bonnet is carbon and the dampers are down there, what that does mean is that the centre of gravity, even though the overall weight is the same, the centre of gravity has been dropped. So this is meant to be a keener, sharper drive, and with its extra power, it's also a very quick one. 0 to 62 takes 4 seconds dead, and this car will do 170 odd miles an hour. Albeit not today, because I'm on the road in the UK where you can't really do 170 miles an hour unless you want to spend a few months inside afterwards. But we have had a correspondent in Germany who has driven this car on track, and he said it was brilliant. He said it was terrific, but his one reservation was the fact that he only drove it on a billiard-smooth German racetrack. Now, I'd have liked to have been there, but for COVID-related reasons, I could not. So I'm very happy to get this car in the UK, and I'm very happy to tell you that actually it is not dreadful on really poor British roads, of which, if you live in Britain, you'll know we have a lot. So I'm afraid I'm going to spoil the surprise. This is a really good car, and it copes with terrible, terrible tarmac very well. So as you would expect, with adaptive dampers, there are different modes. I also get different modes for my steering and different modes for my engine and gearbox response. It's a bit too much, isn't it? I don't need all of those. Don't need all of those. Look, BMW's M engineers, you're really good at this sort of stuff. Who else makes really good drivers' cars? Lotus, Porsche, Ferrari, McLaren. Those people, they tend not to mess around with steering too much. You know best. Just give me a steering system that you like. I will like it too. But I've got adaptive dampers that can be put into either Comfort, Sport, or Sport Plus. Now, I'm not going to lie, comfort isn't all that comfortable. But here's the thing, and here's the unusual thing, I think, because there's usually a way you do these things, right? You put the steering in comfort, you put the chassis in comfort, and you turn the engine and transmission as much as you can. Not with this car, because actually, in comfort on a poor road, the spring rate remains the same because the springs are the springs. But the damping rate, clearly in comfort, is a little softer. What that tends to do is give this car more movement, more vertical movement. And when you're only getting inputs on one side or the other, as you do in the UK, as you go over sort of tree roots this side and truck cambers and cat's eyes and things that side, with the softer dampers, it tends to give more body movement. You get what engineers call head toss when you're driving along and doing that a bit, and it's a bit disconcerting. However, if you just stick the dampers all the way through into Sport Plus, there's no discernible drop-off in ride quality, but the body movements are that much tighter that actually all of that head toss stuff goes away. Now, it's still not a car with the dexterity and fluidity of, say, a Porsche 718 Cayman or particularly an Alpine A110, but if you were expecting this car to be a really brittle, hard-riding, hard-focused thing, like maybe the old M4 GTS. Remember the M4 GTS? I loved that car, but a lot of people found it really difficult to get on with. Well, this isn't that car. This is a much more habitable car than that. But it still is a keener, sharper, more focused, more responsive version of the M2. Again, there's a few geometric changes within the chassis itself that add a bit more steering precision and steering response. I mean, the rack and the level of assistance and everything else is the same, but it is sharper than before. It's hard to tell unless you've been back to back with an M2 competition for a little while, which I haven't been for a while, but it feels a keen, sharp car. And the changes between the M2 and the M2 competition to the rear, which not just settled down the back of the car, but because it was more accurately controlled at the back, that actually gave it better steering response at the front. That's carried over through to here now. So this feels like a really sharp, really keen, really rewarding driver's car. Now, intrinsically, the M2 is a little bit less agile than a 718 Cayman or an Alpine A110S, just by virtue of the fact that its engine is a 3-litre straight six, and it's there, most notably, rather than right there within the wheelbase, so, or right behind the driver. So the fact is that those cars with a very small polar moment of inertia are really keen to turn, and this is less keen to turn. Depends how big a deal you think that is as to how much impact that has on it as a driver's car. I quite like my driver's cars to be front engine and rear wheel drive, and yeah, they take a little bit more time to turn in, but actually they are then, when they start sliding, usually a little bit more predictable and a little more leisurely as they come round as well. So I like a front engine rear wheel drive driver's car. Now, depending on how much stock you put into that, depends on how much of a driver's car you think it is or it isn't. Some of my favourite cars to drive in the world are front engine rear wheel drive, so I'm quite cool with it. I'm quite cool with the slightly more leisurely response, and I really like the response that, you know, you just have to trail the brakes in to get a car turned in, and then you get more options on the power on the way out of a corner. I really enjoy that about a car. Maybe you don't. Maybe you love a mid-engine, precise handler car, in which case perhaps a Porsche is for you instead. So the question is as relevant as it was when the M2 came out and the M2 competition came out. It's just still as relevant today, and the answer is still, well, just as nuanced, but also just as simple as it has always been. Buy the one you want. If you really value that mid-engined agility and the slightly more suppleness, and I think probably a better steering response of the Porsche, buy the Porsche. Bear in mind, although it now has a 6-cylinder engine, it is geared stratospherically. It's so high geared, it's geared for the moon. Whereas the M2, and this is particularly handy on the road, I think, when you can't necessarily stretch the engine all the time, because it makes peak torque low down. It sounds good, makes torque all the way through the rev range. It just keeps on pulling, and it sounds good while it does it. It's still the argument you could make that this is still the preferable powertrain of the two of them. But the thing to remember is that this is, as it was when it came out, a seriously good driver's car. And what I'm pleased to find is that even away from a perfectly smooth German racetrack, it's a great driver's car, even on very poor roads where you can't use all of its performance and you can't exploit all of its handling. It's still really enjoyable, really rewarding. I think in these conditions you may get slightly more back from a mid-engined car, maybe even an Alpine A110. But this is a thoroughly good driver's car. It's just the M2. I'm really glad we liked it in the first place, and it's got better and better and better since. And this M2 CS is a really fitting high note for this Generation 2 series to go out on.